Building a positive church culture. Let's talk a little bit about excellence. Excellence has nothing to do with the size of church or the size of your budget. We all have a potential to do well or to do poorly. And excellence simply means gathering your best efforts to do the best that you can in the setting that you're at. Excellence is striving for the best without crushing other people along the way. Sometimes we can worry so much about being excellent that we end up hurting people. But you know the feeling in your church when you do something and it's not very, it was kind of weak, and people go, oh, we had that event, it didn't work very well. You also know the feeling when your church puts something on or does something and it's just very effective and good. Every time you can put your best foot forward and to provide the most excellent thing that you can, it's good for how the people feel about their church, and it reaches into the community in a smaller way. Excellence is a thought that we need to apply to who our leaders are, and we've talked about this a little bit. But Jim Collins talks about, in his book Good to Great, getting the right people in the right seat on the bus. And sometimes it's very painful, but you have to help transition people from maybe somebody was really good on trustees but not very good on staff parish. Maybe you have an employee that really has been a drain. And you know that these are very painful changes that need to be made sometimes. But if you don't make those changes, all those folks do are to drag you down. We had a consultant in here some years ago, and he said, if you've got somebody serving on a team, if you've got an employee and they don't get it, help them get it. And if you can't help them get it, move them on. The sooner, the better. Those are painful experiences, and it's painful for a few months after that. But by making those changes, you set the stage for future effectiveness, for future excellence in ministry. Something else that I love to do is when we talk to folks and we get them on a team or hire them for something, I tell them, you may be in here volunteering to help with record keeping, and we want you to do that, and that's great. But don't just think that's all you're here for. You've got a heart, you've got a mind, look around, see what's going on, and apply yourself to everything in the church. Don't pigeonhole their abilities and gifts, but invite them to share ideas and thoughts and dreams that they have with you about some other area. And we've come to some really interesting, new, and great things from somebody's mind who was brought into the team for a completely different reason. I'd like to talk to you about grace and guilt. I don't think this is something that we Methodists need to talk about, because hopefully you're operating based on grace, not guilt. But the American churches are full of guilt, and there is a huge need, in my opinion, for churches that will deliver the message of grace. And sometimes people beat me up about that, and they say, well, are you saying that behavior doesn't matter? No, I'm not saying behavior doesn't matter at all. What it means to be a church or a pastor who's focusing on grace instead of guilt is simply to say, I'm not going to focus on the sin. We're not going to focus on what this person did wrong. We're going to focus on redemption. We're going to focus on God's power to help someone move along. Occasionally I will have somebody come in and tell me that I need to kick their husband out of the church because he's done this thing or the next. And if we did that, of course, we're focusing on judgment and guilt. It's difficult, but I explain to these folks, I am in the business of restoration. It doesn't mean I approve of what they did. I'm not going to condone what they did, but I am not going to throw that person away. And sometimes the complainer will leave because I refuse to throw that person away. But at the end of the day, all of us are broken, and I think it's a very important, a strong, and a powerful message. It's a gift of Methodism to us and to our culture to focus on grace instead of guilt. I'd like to talk to you about culture in the concept of full disclosure. At your church, are you creating a climate of secrecy or openness? When people want to know something, is it easy for them to get that information, or is it difficult? You know, if they're a member of the church, doesn't that information belong to them? Other than the giving records, which as far as I know belong to the treasurer, the financial secretary, and you, the pastor, everything else in the church ought to be an open book. And if you want to stop the bickering and quibbling and the unhappiness, when somebody wants to know something about the budget, just say to them, come on in. I'll show you anything you want. You know, if they went to the all-church conference, they could have got that information anyway. I want to know how much the secretary gets paid. Come on in. I want to know how much your housing allowance is. Come on in. Sit down, have those discussions, create a climate of trust. We are not afraid to tell you anything that you want to know about your congregation. And as soon as people realize that's how you behave, they stop asking because they know they can find out. And when they hear someone complaining about someone, they'll say to them, well, why don't you go ask the staff, because I know someone will tell you what that is. Just spend a little bit of time and let the people know anything they want to know. When it comes to full disclosure, there's always somebody here that knows where I am and what I'm doing. If you're like me, you have to work to find private time. And since I have so many nights that are tied up with crazy church things, if I need to go get my car inspected, I might do that 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I have members that don't understand that. I'm sorry. You know, I was at a meeting last night. I've got something else tonight. But I always let somebody know where I am and what I'm doing. And I encourage our staff to do that as well. It breeds trust in your folks when they know, not necessarily that they can get a hold of you. I don't believe that everybody should have your cell phone. I don't think you should be available 24 hours necessarily. But sometimes people maintain control and power by keeping people out of the loop. And it's not a healthy behavior. Let your folks know what you're doing, and as you can welcome them in, let them be a part of your life. Number 10, to build a positive culture, take responsibility for what happens in your church. Ultimately, you're responsible to the bishop. If something happens in Sunday school, they're not going to sue the Sunday school teacher, okay? If there's ever a lawsuit, your name's going to be on the ticket. If there's a problem in your church, the bishop is not going to call the secretary. The bishop is going to call you. When somebody makes a mistake in the church, you take responsibility. Never throw them under the bus. We have staff, we have leaders, and sometimes they goof up. And when I hear about them goofing up, I call them in and I talk to them and we deal with it, but I never throw them under the bus. I tell folks, all right, you're right, I'm going to go work on this and we're going to get this fixed. Your members want to know that you're not afraid to take responsibility. The last thing they want to hear from you is blaming someone else. People will love you if you step into a difficult situation and say, okay, I'm going to take care of this. I am going to make this right. So learn to take responsibility even when what you want to do is go scold someone else. There's nothing constructive that comes from that. Take responsibility and build the trust. A companion thought to this is give credit. Never take credit, but give credit. You take the responsibility, you give the credit. Never blow your own horn. My dad used to say, it sounds really bad, son. If your horn's going to be blown, let someone else blow the horn about what a great person you are. If there's something good going on in the life of the church, never stand up and say, oh, look how great I did. Do you see how terrible that sounds? How arrogant, and it's all about me? If we have a project and I'm working on it with somebody and a member comes to me and says, oh, this is so great, what do I say? Well, you need to tell that to Sherry because she has really poured her heart into this thing. You know, eventually people will figure out that you were involved and they'll think that's great. But when you have to take the limelight instead of giving it to the other person, it's just bad form. When you take responsibility for difficult things and don't throw people under the bus, and conversely give credit to others that participate instead of taking it yourself, people love that about your leadership. Those are behaviors that endear people to you. It's like a lot of things in life. Sometimes we try to get something by taking it. Respect and Honor are things that you gain by giving yourself away and by holding up others instead of ourselves. I was going to skip permission giving, but Gary said I should say a few words about it. Most churches have lots of hoops to jump through. We've changed our structure here. I'd be glad to tell you about that some other day when we had more time. But I would say to you that you have an opportunity to create a climate where it's easy for ministry to get off the ground or hard for ministry to get off the ground. You don't necessarily have to change your structure and eliminate this committee or that committee, but look for ways that you can grease the wheels and help people get their dreams going. Teach people that everyone is called to ministry. Teach them to dream their dreams and to take responsibility for their dreams. Don't let them come to you and dump their dreams on you or on the board or the membership. Teach them to gather a team around them and figure out how to fund their things, but release them to be in ministry. The most fun thing about being a Christian is being in ministry. And that means we spend a lot less time in meetings. One of the things I love to do is cancel meetings. If there's no agenda, we don't have it. Trustees are supposed to meet every month. An email goes around. Anybody got anything for this? No. We cancel the meeting. On a good year, we might schedule 12 staff parish meetings and have 3 of them. So cancel meetings so that people are spending their energy in ministry. Grease the wheels so it's easy for them to get their ideas and their dreams going on out in the world. I would also say about this, allow ministries that are in ICU to die. It's okay for that Wednesday night program that no one wants to do anymore. It's okay for that to die. Sometimes as churches we think, well, we've done that forever. Somehow that's our identity, but no one wants to take responsibility for it. If no one takes responsibility for it, no one is called to it, and you can probably let it go. Some years ago, we were involved with a ministry in Westport called Sarah's Shop, a wonderful ministry, kind of a thrift store to homeless women. And there was a gal that kind of took point in our ministry with that and had a team that helped her, and she moved to Florida. And before she moved, she had somebody else that was going to lead the thing. And a few months into leading the thing, this new person realizes how much work this is and bows out. So we put something in the bulletin and asked if anyone would be interested in leading this ministry to Sarah's Shop. No one stepped forward. We went to the team. We said, will some one of you take it? No, they wouldn't. So we went down to Sarah's Shop and we said, we're very sorry, but right now our people evidently want to spend their energy somewhere else. We may be back, but we wanted to be honest with you about the fact of why you're not going to see us. You know what they said? Thank you for telling us. We can't tell you how many folks just stop showing up and we never know what happened. We'll figure it out. Thank you for being our partner. It's okay to let ministries that are not supported by your congregation anymore to sort of go on their way. Number 13, conflict resolution. Is there a more important thing for pastors and church leaders to work on? Number 1, don't let things fester. How many sleepless nights do you want to have? It's just craziness to let things fester. If you're like me, in the fight or flight response, I want to flee. I want to hide from conflict. I've had to learn in life the importance of stepping up to talk things through and work things out. Don't let a problem fester. Go to them. Find them. Take the initiative. I have somebody that's out here in the congregation complaining about something with children's choir. I call her up. I get her to come in and sit down for a cup of coffee. I listen to her. She tells me what she's thinking. And I say to her, all right, how can I be a better pastor? How can I deal with this in a way that's more effective or healthy for our church? And you know, sometimes in this dialogue, I learn from them, and they're right. And when they're right, I tell them, gosh, you're right. We missed this. I'm going to fix this. But more often than not, by the time you get in and sit down and talk through this with them, they get the rest of the picture and they go, oh, I see why we're doing that. And then you just hug them and thank them and they go on their way. And then 2 years later, the same person, a different issue, I call them again. And we go through the same process. I have one person in the church it took about 4 times. And they finally realized that when they act out, I'm going to call them. We're going to have coffee. And they finally stopped doing that. You can't fix everyone, and I can tell you some horror stories about situations that I was not able to fix. But if you don't step in and try to fix it, it's definitely not going to get fixed. Ron Richardson has a book called Creating a Healthier Church. And in the church, or in the book, he tells the story of the electrical transformer. And you know, there's the big, giant high wires. We've got a picture. There it is. Got the big, giant high wires, and they have lots of voltage in there. You know, you grab a hold of that and touch the ground and you're toast, right? You're a crispy critter. The transformer takes that giant, heavy power and turns it into something that can run my daughter's hairdryer. There are people in your church that operate in reverse. They take the smallest thing and they blow it up into something giant. All of us have people like that. A pastor needs to be a transformer. A pastor needs to be, and your church leaders need to be the kind of people that can take this giant, heavy, painful, death-defying electricity and boil it down and calm it down to where that energy can be translated into healthy things in the life of the congregation. As much as it frightens you, as much as it unnerves you, as much as it might make you angry, learn how to step into those situations of deep conflict and calm it down. Reduce the energy, reduce the stress so that your congregation can focus again on what it is that we're supposed to be doing. Conflict resolution. Stay with it, don't give up, and learn to be an expert at forgiveness. Christians are supposed to believe in forgiveness. If you're a pastor, you need to be an expert at it. There is something about getting up on Sunday morning when you see over in this third row, that person that wounded you so deeply, and they're sitting there with a smug look on their face. Your whole sermon can be dominated by how you feel about that. Find the place in your soul to see them as they are, as a broken child of God. Become an expert at forgiveness. Number 14, passionately pursue your vision. If your vision is joy, take it everywhere you go. Whatever's on your mind, whatever you're trying to teach the folks, talk about it in your sermons over and over, not every week, but keep holding up the things that you feel are important. There was a time in the life of our church where we really wanted to raise the level of missional involvement in our people. And we talked about it for years, and little by little, the folks are enculturated and more mission things happen. There was a time in our church when I wanted to talk to our folks about what it means to learn to live outside of yourself, to live the life that is concerned about others. The whole concept of taking up the cross. We know that, right, as pastors. And so I talked about that a lot. In the last few years, we've talked an awful lot about what Cody was talking about earlier, which is learning to see through problems, learning to see to the other side, learning to see the joy, learning to not be dominated by whatever the unhappiness is in your life, but learning to see through it and still see the good. Don't just look at the sky and see the clouds. Look past the clouds and see the sky, because the blue and the beautiful is there if we can learn to see it. Whatever it is that you are trying to teach your folks, stay with it. Passionately pursue what it is that you are doing. If you want people to love their church, then you have to show them that you are passionately in love with your church. Don't call a work day and not show up. Don't call a practice for something and not show up. And I know you can't be there everything all the time, but set the example. Show them, I can do this. I can be there. I can give. I can help make this happen. They will likely not do more than what they see you doing yourself. If you are not financially invested in your church, they are not going to be financially invested in your church. Try this. I've heard pastors that do this. It's time for the annual pledge drive. Well, you know, my wife and I, we've had a lot of problems this year, and we're really not able to give very much, but we'd like for you to fill out a pledge card and turn it in. And what's the result of that? Paltry commitments from people. Get your heart on the table, set the example, show the way, passionately pursue. If you love the church, it will show. Finally, let me talk a little bit about taking care of yourself, because we're not very good at this. And I will tell you that I'd like to think that I've been getting better at this over the years, partly because I've stopped trying to fix everything, and partly because I'm getting older and slower. The church will take from you everything that you give it. The church will rob you of every moment, every thought, every piece of your heart. The church can ruin your marriage. The church can alienate you from your children. You have to have healthy boundaries. And part of what's helped me so much is to begin thinking about the faith, not so much about what we believe or what we think or what is the doctrine or what do I need to do, but as a relationship. Not I have a soul, but I am a soul. It's the difference between all the rational thinking that we Americans love to do and just trying to sit and rest. I will tell you, years ago, when I was younger and I would go to these pastors' meetings and the district superintendent would say, okay, we're going to take 10 minutes for centering prayer. I go, what is this? I mean, really? And so during the 10 minutes of centering prayer, my brain is worried about the lists that it's making. What have I got to do this afternoon? And all the places I've got to go and all the spiritual things that must be done. And I missed, maybe I wasn't ready for, the chance to slow down and relax. Some of the most spiritual things that we can do are to go find a bench and plop down. I take a week every year for continuing education, and I go to a camp in the Redwoods, and I do nothing but pack into the forest every day and find a picnic table and read. And sometimes I don't talk to anybody for days, and it's wonderful. When you have your assessment, your district superintendent will ask you, how is it with your soul? And I want to encourage you that all of us know what it's like when you're just pressed and exhausted and you've written this sermon 3 different times and you go to bed on Saturday night, you still don't feel good about it, you wake up on Sunday morning and you feel like you want to write it again, and you walk in and there's this prayer in your heart that says, God, this is all I've got. I really tried to collaborate with you. I'm just parched, I'm just lost, I can't. That's going to happen to us. We're human. It's going to happen. It's going to keep happening, but we minimize those things by finding our soul, by remembering that we are a soul. And when my brain starts to get crazy, and I've been doing this a lot lately, I stop and I say, okay, I'm just setting aside my notes. What's in here? What's in here? What do you really want on the table? And I'll start all over, and it may be very simple, and it may not be very theological, and it may not have 3 points or bounce back to the Scripture 4 times like maybe, but we have to learn to live from the heart. When you as a pastor are living from your heart, your people will recognize that in you. There's something that happens to human beings when we get together and we connect soul to soul. It's how we make friends. We don't make friends because we agree on doctrine. We make friends because there's something about you. I know you care about me, and there's something that I see in you, and we connect and we love one another. So find ways to take care of yourself. If you don't know very much about how to find the contemplative side of the Christian faith, let's start reading about that. I've been reading about the contemplative faith for a few years, and there's wonderful books that can kind of introduce you into a life of prayer that isn't about getting something, a life of prayer that's just about you spending time with our Father. I encourage you to find Sabbath, not necessarily a day off, maybe, but Sabbath rest, that place where your soul can just rest in God. I also would encourage you to find friends. This is a little odd in the church because sometimes pastors, you feel like you're not supposed to have friends. My best friends are members of this church. I could tell them anything, and I do. And yeah, I've had a couple of situations where it didn't work out and I got stabbed in the back. But I'd rather risk that. And we all need friends. We just need friends. If you can't find them in your church, find another pastor close by, someone that you can tell your worst secrets to and they still love you, someone that will let you be a human being with them. Because as we come to our church and the best of us is on the table, is on display and available for our people, the healthier, the more whole that we are, the better we are as leaders, and the more we can do to invite others into a healthy culture. Okay, I want to again just go through some of the books that I mentioned. Leading Change by James O'Toole. That's about the invisible leader and finding ways to motivate people without having to be at the center. Monday Morning Leadership is 7 sessions. It's a wonderful book with some just basic tools for leadership. The Starfish and the Spider. Fly to the Buffalo is by Belasco. Managing Transitions by William Bridges. It's one of my favorite books. Creating a Healthier Church, that's the book where the guy talks about the Transformers, and then Good to Great.